So welcome everyone to this first lecture in this Ignite course. I'm super excited for being here. You're a lot of people, so I'm also kind of scared a little. Never seen so many people in a first night. So just before starting, some information about me. I will be one of the teacher of this Ignite course. I'm currently the COO at Strive School. And as a background, I have a bachelor in computer science, a master in computer engineering. I had the chance to enroll to 2 startup programs like Lewis and Labs, that is based in Italy, in Rome, and Y Combinator, one of the most famous in the Silicon Valley. And I enjoy coding a lot. And with my passion for coding, I had the chance both to work for amazing companies such as Reply, Allianz, Microsoft, BMW, and Generali, but also to join some hackathons. Hackathons are some crazy marathons in which you have to code for 3 days in a row, basically with no sleep, in order to win a prize. And in one case, we were super excited because we won a trophy in both Rome and Paris. That was the BNP Paribas hackathon. Hackathon.
Diego, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah, sure.
I think there are some people that can join our meeting. They say that they are waiting to be accepted, and that, or either they click on the link and nothing's happening.
Yeah, I'm clicking on admit all oh, okay, now I can see why I had a filter active on the participant list. My fault. Okay, I think now they should be able to join. Just one sec. Can you mute yourself if you don't have to speak? Thank you very much. Okay, if you can help me with that, Alessia, it will be awesome. Okay, so let's start with this Ignite. So just some class etiquette before starting. So use Zoom control to assess speed and understanding of the topic. If I'm running too much or if I'm super boring, just use these commands that you should find in your interface to signal that to me. That would be super awesome because it will allow me to fine-tune the lecture depending on the audience. Then if you have any question, just use the raise hand button if you want to ask something. This will prioritize and queue you so that we can take the question in the moment in which we don't disrupt the lecture. And of course, keep the mic off unless you have to say something. It will happen over and over, but I don't want to mute you. But more often than not, it will happen that there will be some dog barking or some children crying. And usually like it will be really hard to keep the concentration if something like that will happen. And especially when we are not coding, let's try to squeeze all the questions into the Q&A section or into the breaks. This way, the flow of the lecture will not be broken. So now that we're starting this kickoff, let's see what will be the topic of the day. So first and foremost, there will be the introduction to the course. Then we will see an overview of the main technology for a web developer. After that, we will start our intro to HTML, that will be the language, let's say, for the day, and the intro to Git. But why do you need to know more about this? Of course, because having the introduction to the course, you will have the idea of the topics and of the schedule day by day of the activities. And wait, somebody in the waiting room. Okay. The overview of the main technologies for a web developer will help you by giving you a glance of the bigger picture of the web development. The intro to HTML, it's pretty self-explanatory. HTML is a foundation of every web page, and we need to start getting acquainted to it as soon as possible. And of course, Git is the most famous software versioning tool, and therefore, to become a professional web developer, you need to know how to use it, to be able to collaborate with other persons. So at the end of the day, you will know the structure and the goal of this course. You will have a better understanding of the developer role and the main tools and languages used. You will be able to create your first HTML page, and you will be able to create your first repository with Git and GitHub. So let's start with the schedule. Each night, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we will start like tonight at 6:30 GMT +1 with this event that is called Kickoff. After that, we're going to have a work time until 7:15. Then we're going to have a break that usually will be used for Q&A. And then another work time with a final debrief in which we will recap and we're going to host another Q&A section. In the rest of the day, so Tuesday, Thursday, and into the weekend, we will propose some non-mandatory homework. This homework should allow you to increase your skill, revise the topics of the lectures, and get your hand dirty in coding. Of course, by doing them, you will benefit a lot, so we will strongly encourage you to complete them when you have time. We will send them as soon as possible, and you will have the whole day to carve the time to complete them. So the kickoff event, that is one that we are having right now, it's super important because it will give you an introduction to the daily activity so that you will know what we're gonna see, why those topics matters for you, and what you will be able to achieve by the end of the day. It's super important to be on time because we're gonna start regardless of the number of participants that we're gonna have in order to be respectful of the time of each and every one. And of course, you're gonna have the chance to ask questions on the topic of the previous lecture. So let's take a glance of the topic week by week. So in the first week, we're gonna talk about the principles of web development. We're gonna learn the fundamentals of web development, writing the first line of code, writing HTML and CSS. We're going to learn the concept of tag, of nesting, the layout rules, and the responsibility of the cited languages. We're going to learn the basic of Git, the most famous and important versioning tool. So the topics, to summarize, will be HTML, CSS, versioning control through Git, and the IDE that we will propose Visual Studio Code. In the second week, we're going to talk about advanced CSS, and we're going to introduce JavaScript. So in this week, we will learn everything about selectors like class, ID, parent-child relationship in order to target the DOM elements you are interested in into your page. And we're going to learn the concept of responsive web development and mobile-first approach in building your web page. And of course, and this will be a bad biz for many of you, we will introduce JavaScript, the real very first programming language that we will encounter. So the topics will be advanced CSS, principle of programming like variables, condition, object, loops, and we will have an introduction to the JavaScript language. The third week, that will be probably the most exciting but complicated too, will be about dynamic web programming. So we will start a week able to create great pages with the style we want and with the interaction we like, but we're missing the connection to the rest of the world, okay? So we will have marvelous page that will be somehow hard-coded, fixed, always the same. In this week, we're gonna learn how to handle HTTP requests from our page to some external server. We will understand the client-server architecture, and we will manage the asynchronicity of this operation in order to create dynamic web pages. So imagine that, I don't know, your Instagram feed will always look the same unless somebody loads some picture for you. Of course, that is not a good experience for you. So by using dynamic web page, we will be able to load every time new content related to the user in order to create amazing applications. And of course, the topics will be Ajax, that is the protocol, let's say, that allow us to connect to the rest of the world with JavaScript, async await, that is a design pattern, fetch, and create, of course, dynamic web pages. So, any questions so far?
Hey, hi.
Hey, Jose.
Hey, Diego, thank you for having us and giving this course for all of us. So I have one question, like with all of these programs and languages that we are going to use, are we going to really learn how to write them, or are we going to use like some tool like to complete or semi-code or something?
No, totally from scratch. We will write every single piece of code.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Are we going to be looking into any frameworks such as React or anything? Or is it just basic JavaScript and HTML?
For the moment, it's just basic JavaScript, but you will have all the notion that you can use to build up your experience with React once you grasp the fundamentals of JavaScript.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question here.
Sure.
Which is the kind of app we can build with the things we learn in this course?
Basically, most of the web applications you see out there. I don't know, you can create a clone of Airbnb, you can create a clone of the Spotify web app, and so on and so forth. Of course, it takes a lot of time to build them. And of course, in production environment, usually, as I think Jose was suggesting, we use some frameworks that easy our development process. But let's say that you will have all the tool to build them. Not maybe in the most efficient way, but you should be able to do so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, awesome. Let's continue with this lecture. So now we're going to have a quick glance of the role of the full stack web developers, because it's important to understand what do we mean with front end, back end, client, server, in order to be to start building our dictionary that we will use over and over these lectures. So first and foremost, in the web development, there are mainly two kinds of developers: the front-end developers and the back-end developers. And then there is all a list of specialists out there, like the AI engineers, game developer, DevOps, mobile developer, and so on and so forth. The front-end developers primarily works with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and they create the client-side part of the application. And usually for a front-end developer, the client is the browser. So Safari, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, whatever you're using for browse the web. Just to give you an example, the Facebook web app you use from the browser to send messages, post new content, like, share, and comment is what the front-end developer is working on. While the backend developer creates the server side of the application that takes care of data, security, authentication, and authorization. And it's transparent to the end user. You can't see what is happening on the backend, but you know that it's giving you valuable result. Like, for instance, through the Facebook API, you can handle messages, posts, like, share, comments, and make them available to the rest of the user or to the rest of your friends. So it's what you can see. So your client is sending the picture to your Instagram account, and somebody on the backend is taking that picture and saving it on an hard drive somewhere. It's storing and entering to a database, is making that picture available to all the people that follows you. And the full stack developer has both the front end and the back end skill. So it can understand the bigger picture of how all the pieces goes together to create the application itself. And of course, can relate to both the front end and the back end specialist. Most of the case, it's not just a generalist, but it's somebody that really prefers to work as a backend or as a front end, and has also the notion of the other side of the medal so that he can collaborate with a bigger team. In the current web development, we have this concept of three-tier architecture, in which we have our application divided in these three layers that altogether builds this full stack. So the presentation layer, the business logic layer, and the data access layer. But what does it mean? So the presentation layer is the interface that the user uses to access the application, that present the information to the user. It could be the browser, the app, and so on and so forth. And is what we will focus the most during these weeks. For example, going back to Facebook, is the web app that shows you the content. The business logic layer, it takes care of data handling, of data validation, like, for instance, if the email that you put in is a real email or not, or if the date of birth is something of this century or not, and so on and so forth. Access control list, that means if the current user is allowed to post on another person's profile, or if he can edit a specific post in a forum. For example, going back to Facebook, the web app allows you to comment only certain posts and send messages only to your friend and not to everyone. And last but not least, we have the data access layer. The data access layer is that layer that access to the database to store information, to the file system to store files like pictures or videos, and handle the persistence so that the same data is shared amongst all the users in the platform, and takes care on how we store and interact with the data. Like if you can imagine the Netflix backend, there is this data access layer that has to search for the movie that you want to see right now, pick that movie and start streaming it to you. And that is what the data access layer is doing. Or if we want to go back to the Facebook example, the picture that you posted on your profile should be uploaded and safely stored in a CDN somewhere and made available to all your friends. So these are the technologies that we use in that compels to each one of these layers. So for instance, for the presentation layer, we have the web pages. And usually the web pages are built using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. On the business logic layer, we have this other element that is called web service. It's basically, you can imagine it like a remote brain to which you can talk to. And the technologies that are used usually are .NET, Node.js, Ruby, PHP, and so on and so forth. And for the data access layer, we usually have the database that could be either relational or non-relational, something such as Postgres, SQL Server, or MongoDB. One of the trends that is growing and growing year after year see these technologies, sees React, Angular, or Vue to create single-page applications as a presentation layer, sees in the business logic layer the combination of Node.js and Express.js, and in the data access layer, the use of MongoDB, one of the most famous NoSQL database. And in this course, as you can see by this amazing rocket, we will focus mostly on the presentation layer. So we will learn how to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But fear not, out there is a lot of services that provides you with this building block to create amazing application. You can play with the API from Skyscanner, from Airbnb, from Spotify, from a lot of other services so that you can build meaningful application and find a job maybe as a front-end developer. So let's take a look to this front-end development and let's see what is the responsibility and the role of these three pieces that compose it. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So first and foremost, HTML, that stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So it defines the structure of the document. So the structure, nothing more, nothing less, no fancy fonts, no strange behavior, just the structure of it, and links together all the pages of the website. So if I click on this button, I will go to the next slide. If I click on this other one, I will go back to Google, and so on and so forth. And it's responsible for the information architecture, so the structural design of the website navigation. You can imagine as a map or as some sign into a park. The waterfall is on that side, the picnic area on the other one, and so on and so forth. This is how HTML looks like. So as you can see, we have some code on the left-hand side that I don't expect you to understand at this moment. And this on the right-hand side is how it will be rendered by the browser, how the browser will make it available to the user. As you can see, it's nothing fancy, but as you can see here, we have a title that is a little bigger. We have a paragraph. We have a list with these dots on the left of it. And this is how HTML look like. When we talk about HTML, we have to introduce the concept of DOM. That is something that we will be playing a lot through JavaScript. So DOM is the document object model. The DOM describes the structure of the page. It's a sort of an outline or a map of the content within the website. And we will use JavaScript to modify the page. And by doing that, we will say that we will be interacting with the document object model. Of course, any error in the DOM, like an enclosed tag, can break the page and produce unexpected behavior. So HTML, we can leave it behind for the moment. It's about the structure and the content of the page. Let's move to the next one. CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It defines a set of rules for how the DOM is translated into the visual form. Cascading Style Sheet rules describe the priority of how the styles are rendered on the page. And the rules can be as simple as defining color, sizes, fonts, and applying traditional design concepts like contrast, alignment, proximity, etc., etc., etc. Now, to let you understand how CSS works, I would like to show you this website that more often than not doesn't work. So as you can see, this is a pretty decent website. There is no interesting content here. But the interesting part here is that we can switch between different CSS, maintaining the very same HTML. So as you can see here, we have CSS, Zen Garden, Beauty of CSS, demonstration, and some paragraph. If I click, for instance, on mid-century modern, as you can see, the website contains the same content. The HTML is exactly the same, but the way it is represented is completely different. Okay, so same content, completely different aspect. If we click, for instance, also on steel to make an example, as you can see, the content is the same, but thanks to CSS, we're building this animation. We're changing the behavior of the element, but especially we see the same content in a different way. So again, CSS is all about how your HTML code will result when rendered by the browser. Of course, as you have seen in this quick preview, CSS can also handle animation. So it allows us to make transformation of the elements that we have into the page. And we can use it also for responsiveness. When we say that a website is responsive when it will adjust depending on the screen side. So a responsive website will be usable both on mobile, tablet, and from a large screen like the one of your notebook, okay? So that is a responsive website. And if we can build that, it's all thanks to CSS. This is a very simple example on how HTML looks like. I know that this page is not as fancy as the one we've seen on CSS Garden, but as you can see here, we are somehow given some property about the title color, about the alignment of some elements, about, I don't know, some padding and so on and so forth. The same page without that CSS was something like this, okay? With some lines of CSS and probably the worst lines of CSS ever written. As you can see, it looks slightly different, okay? And now let's introduce the third character in this story. We have JavaScript. JavaScript is a full stack language. What does it mean? It means that we can use JavaScript to create a front-end part, but also to create back-end code. Thanks to JavaScript, we can create complete application knowing a single language. And this is pretty cool. And it's kind of easy to learn because it doesn't have a particular hard structure at the beginning, like classes or namespaces and so on and so forth. You can write the first lines of JavaScript very simply. And it has a huge community. Having a huge community on the back of a programming language, it's super important because it will happen. It happens to everyone to have a problem with a specific framework, to have a problem with a specific case of the language. The user is the community, the easier it will be to find help. But not only that, the user is the community, the more likely it is to have job openings in that specific market and technology. And therefore, to know JavaScript is kind of a key that opens very, very many doors. And is a language that started as a simple scripting language for making some text blink and some page reloads. And now, thanks to this evolution in the last 20 years or so, since 1995, I believe, it is evolving year after year, including new and amazing features. We will use it for async loading, user interaction, and DOM manipulation. What does it mean? Async loading, it means that we can send a message to a friend without reloading the page. User interaction, it means that we can intercept the user scrolling and show him a banner to subscribe to our mailing list. And of course, with DOM manipulation, it means that we can change the content of the page depending on the user behavior or on the information that we're loading from external sources. And this very small here. Please, Google, stop showing me the slide number. Just one sec. Yeah, as you can see on the bottom left on the corner, there is like the simplest piece of JavaScript that you can imagine. We added a button to the page with say hello, and on click, as you might imagine that by that piece of code, it will alert. That means create these horrible windows here that more often than not annoy you when you surf the web. You will see this message that we typed here. So as you can see, we were able, thanks to JavaScript, to react to a user input. Let's have a super quick overview of the backend in general. Okay, so we will see the server, the features, and the DB. What do we mean with server, and what is the role of a server in web development? First and foremost, the server is where we host our application. That means that is the computer in which our code runs and that made itself available to the rest of the world. On the other hand, it will provide all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we will write together. So when you will go on www.yourname.com, the server will provide you with the file that will then be transformed into the page that you expect the user to see. But it's not only that. It could host web services to handle requests from our client. As we've seen before, the web service is the main object of the data access layer. So on the server, we can create web services to respond to the user input, like login, register, and so on and so forth. And of course, it can also host a database that is the bank in which we store all the valuable information for our app. And of course, it will serve files. So if you are building the Netflix backend, you will have a lot of servers that will stream the videos over and over to all the people that are interested in watching those specific movies or series. The main feature that the backend offers is the data persistence. We will see as a front-end developers that more often than not, in the moment in which we will restart our browser, our information will disappear. Thanks to the backend, we can persist this information and made available to other person. It can have an authentication and authorization layer. So authentication recognize a user based on some mean of authentication, like username and password, or I don't know, blockchain wallet, etc. Or authorization, is this user allowed to perform this operation, yes or not, and so on and so forth. Or to create user custom experience. When I log on Instagram, for instance, I will see a different feed from the feed that anybody else will see in this room. Different following, different followers, different interest, and so on and so forth. And also for localization. So if I access Google from where I am right now, it will be google.it. If somebody of you logs from Germany, probably it will go on google.de, and so on and so forth. The last piece that we need to understand the backend is the database. The database, of course, is the king of data persistence. It stores huge amount of information and it allows fast and scalable querying. Just consider that the Visa payments system can process up to 20,000 payments per second. That is kind of huge if you think about it. Not considering all the things that happens on TikTok or any other platform every second in the world. And of course, it provides data recovery tools. So when you save something in a database, you know that that something will be always available for you in the future. There is no way for that data to die, hopefully. So there are two main categories of database that I want just to introduce to you, that are the SQL or relational database and the NoSQL or not only relational database. The relational database looks like spreadsheet. So you have some tables in which you have some columns in which you put some information. Imagine this to be the students table of our school. As you can see, you have the ID that will always be a number, the name that will always be a string, the email that will always be an email, the age, and the sex that will always be M or F or I don't know. So everything is in form of table. And the tables are connected by relationship. And as you know, relational database. This is where the name came from. And we will query this database with the SQL language. These kind of database are used by classic legacy environments because they are strongly typed and strongly validated. So there is no way to mess with them. All the check are at the database level. So I cannot type the wrong number of euros I'm withdrawing from the bank account or something like that. And they have high performance inquiry on many tables. Like for instance, if we have a table for the students and a table for the exam, by using one field to connect them with the same ID, we can join the two tables together and create a single story in which for each student we have all the exam he or she passed. Okay, so as you can see, we have 2 exams for John Doe and 1 for Anne, while Lucy is still at 0. On the other hand, we have the growing trend of the non-relational database or not only relational database, in which the data looks like a file. And in this file, we have these elements that are called documents. In this NoSQL database, everything is in the form of a file and all the information are in JSON files. That means in JavaScript object notation. It is more flexible, so you can change the structure over and over while creating your application. Or maybe for some user, you will have some extra information because you need so, and for other, you won't have it. And can scale very easily. And of course, MongoDB is one of the most famous NoSQL database out there. Okay, awesome. Welcome back, and let's get our hands dirty. So now we're going to introduce our first language, that is HTML. That is not proper programming language, and we will see later why. But still, it's the first language, and it's one of the building blocks of the modern web. So again, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And why this matters? This matters because defining the structure of the document, we can link together all the pages of our website. And it creates this structural design and of the website navigation. That will be the topic of the day. And the DOM, just to revise a little, it's a document object model. So it describes the structure of the page, and it's sort of like an outline or a map of the content within the website. When we will use JavaScript to modify the page, we will be interacting with the document object model. Wait, some people to let in. And why hypertext markup language matters? Because it is a markup language, not a programming language. It uses tags. So imagine that you are, I don't know, you're one of the first users of the printing of the printer back in the 16th century. Okay, so and you want something to be bolder, and you want something to be, I don't know, oblique or something like that. At the time, you have to wrap that specific piece of text inside of some symbols that will allow the printer to apply the right style to the current element. So you're writing your novel, you want one name to be rendered as bold. Well, at that time, you would have had to use a specific symbol to say that that specific piece is bold. And HTML is just the modern version of it. So we define these tags with the angular brackets, and the content within will enforce the rules and the style that is specified by the content of these brackets. Like for instance, as we've seen in the previous screenshot, by using p, content of the paragraph, /p, this is a full paragraph, and this is the content of it. Most of these tags has both an opening and a closing tag. Like for instance, this div has this content, and to tell the browser that the content is finished, we have to specify the very same name we have before, but with the backslash in front of it. But some of them are self-closing because they cannot accept children. Like for instance, the image. We cannot nest one element inside the image, and therefore, after we specify the syntax for the image that we will see better in few minutes, we have to close the single tag in this way. Of course, as I was mentioning, you can nest tags. We can call the external one parent and the internal one children. For instance, we can have this div that is parent of this p that is children. And we will see later on why this matters, but it's something that you will use over and over. Suppose that you're building, I don't know, the cards that contain the songs in Spotify. Inside of every card, you will have a button to play the song. You will have the image to, to notify the user which songs is. Maybe you will have a couple of texts, one for the title, one for the genre. Maybe you will have a number to specify the minutes of the song, and so on and so forth. And all these elements will be into this parent-child relationship within each other. And every non-self-closing tag can have how many children that you want, okay, unless you finish the memory of your computer. But yeah, that is not a problem that we will face in 2021, hopefully. And always remember to close tags. This is like one of the codes that most often create problems to students' code. So always remember, if I'm opening a tag like this div, I need to close it soon after. So let's take a look to a quick demo. Let me close this CSS thingy, and let me open my Visual Studio Code. But before that, let me just create a folder into my desktop. You can do it wherever you want. My suggestion is always not doing while I'm doing it. It's better to follow the lectures. This code will be made available, and you will have plenty of time to revise the topics. If you start coding while I'm coding, you will have 90% of your brain focus on not making typo and just copy what I'm doing. While if you focus your whole attention to remember the steps, it will be far more easier. So let's create this folder that we will call week 1, day 1, for instance. From Visual Studio Code, I can open folders. Visual Studio Code is one of the possible IDEs. I suggest you to install in the latest email. You can use whatever IDE that you like. You can use Atom, you can use whatever you want. It's freely available from the Microsoft website, and it's open source. That means that they release the code for everyone that want to look in, and it's kind of one of the most widely adopted. Visual Studio Code works with the concept of folder. This is pretty common. So once we open Visual Studio Code, we have to open a folder. In our case, we'll just go to the folder that I just created, and I will select this folder. As you can see in the left pane, this is the name of the folder that I have, and this will be the list with all the files I have in. We can create a file in several ways. I can click on this icon here, new file, or I usually right-click, new file. And in this case, I will create my first HTML file. Now, as you can see, Visual Studio Code recognizes that this file is an HTML file, and therefore it plays this symbol here. Let's try to just create our first paragraph. Welcome to Ignite. First paragraph together. The most complicated part is not to do in typo. We can open this file in several ways. We can go to the very same folders, like going into desktop and double clicking on the index HTML, that will open the paragraph with the browser of your choosing, like Chrome for me in this case, or we can install a very convenient extension. I suggest you to install later this extension that is called Live Server. What does Live Server do? Well, basically, it will just reload the page every time we save the file. So if I modify this, adding a second paragraph here a second one, and I save the file, here in the browser, I will still see the old version, unless I refresh the page. What Live Server does is just to refresh automatically the page. That is far better. So I can right-click on the files and open with Live Server. Wait, there is somebody in the waiting room. Okay. Okay, so now that we are opening the page through Live Server, if I add a third paragraph here, like whatever, and I save it, as you can, oh wait, what are you doing? Is it running? Yeah, it should. This should refresh automatically, providing us with the latest version of our code, sparing us to refresh the page each and every time. But now that we have seen that our code transforms into something that we can see into the browser, let's see how we can do it properly and what is the correct structure of an HTML page. So first and foremost, as you might know, in an HTML, we have two main tags, head and body. Every HTML page contains a root tag HTML. Of course, the browser is kind with us and showed us the content regardless. But inside these two tags, we usually find two children, head that will contain the configuration of the page and body that will contain the content of the page. So head, configuration, body, content. What do we mean with configuration of the page? What should we place inside the head? Inside the head, we usually have the title of the page. That will be the title that we see on our navigation bar. We will have the import of external file like styles, fonts, scripts. I don't know, if somebody is in marketing here, we will put, I don't know, the Google Analytics tag here and so on and so forth. We will put there the metadata for the SEO. So what the Google crawler will see of our web page. We will put the keywords, we will put the preview we will see when we share the page on Facebook, on Twitter, and so on and so forth. And yeah, exactly. So the thing to remember at this point is the head is the page configuration. Let's take a look to this. Let's go back to Visual Studio. Let's create a more proper page. So HTML. Let's close this HTML tag. It's always better to just close the tags in the moment in which we create them. And here we can create our head, in which just for, oh, let me zoom a little. Just remind about it. Okay, I think it's better like this. And for title of the page, let's set, this is the title we'll see into the navbar. And of course, here I will just add the body, empty one, because we don't know how to manage it yet. Let's get back to our page. Let's refresh. And as you can see here, we don't have any content into the page. There is no content, zero, nada. But here, if we put the browser on the navigation bar, this is the title we expect to see there. And you're not the only one that will see this title. Also, Google will see this title and the crawler from Google. So if you have to, I don't know, index your web page to win the chart of, I don't know, best renting place in Munich, it could be a good idea to put it in the title or in some metadata inside the head. Secondly, we have the body. So typical things that you put in your body will be the text, the paragraph, the sections. You will have images, you will have links, you will have lists, scripts, table. So in the body, we will place all the content. The body is what the user will see. Let's go back here to our to our page. Let's add here a paragraph again with this should be seen. Okay, let's get back to our page. And as you can see, it immediately refreshed the page. Live server was not working because since we didn't have a body, it was not able to inject the JavaScript to refresh the page when the file changed. Gotcha. So now that we know that in the head we have the configuration and in the body we have the content, which kind of content can we add to our web application? Let's go very quickly through a list of them. With H1 to H6, that means H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, we have the heading that goes from the most important to the least important. So H1 is the most important out there, and is the one that Google and the crawlers go to look for, okay? And it's better to have just one H1 per page because it will be the most important element for many search engines. And the usage, as you might have understood so far, is pretty straightforward. So you use the name of the heading tag to contain the content and you close it. Like for instance, if we go back to Visual Studio Code, we can have our heading H1, that is the most important one. And we can set it as welcome to Thrive School Ignite, something like this. And as a subtitle, we can have an H2 that will be week 1, day 1. And maybe another one, H3, that will be, or H4, just to show you that you can use them as you like. H4, learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Awesome. If we go back to the page, as you can see, as horrible and nice that this page might look like, we have 3 different elements. The H1 that, as you can see, the browser renders by default a little bigger. Then we have the subtitle that is a little smaller. And going down, we have the H4 that is even smaller than that. Of course, we know that CSS will be the one with the last word on the styling. But by default and by design, the browser tries to give them a priority based on the H1 to H6 size. Then we have the paragraph. We know the paragraph very well. It usually contains text, and it will take the whole line to display the content because it's a display block, we will see later. And the usage is pretty simple. Let me show you what I mean with that. So for instance, let's add here one paragraph like this is, I don't know, things we are learning. And I will create another paragraph to say HTML. Okay. If I go back to the page, as you can see, even if there was plenty of space on the right of this element, since this is a paragraph, it's taking the whole space of the page. If I inspect the page by right-click, inspect, I will open this tool from Google Chrome that is very similar on every browser that allows me to select the elements and see the space they are taking. And as you can see here, this paragraph here is taking the whole line. This is the result of the p tag to be by default display block. That means, hey dude, take the whole line just for me. Let's continue with one of his brothers, that is the span. The span, it's a generic text container like the paragraph is, but works exactly the other way around. So we can use it with span. This is text span. But if we take the very same text and we move it into 2 spans, the result will be pretty different. So let me change this with a span. And as you can see here, the span is not taking the whole space, the whole horizontal space, but is taking as least space as it can. And therefore, the 2 spans stands together in this line without disrupting the flow of the page, okay? And if we inspect them, the paragraph is taking the whole line, the span is taking very little space, enough space to contain its content. The span is often used together with the paragraph to change the aspect of certain parts. Like for instance, I can select this learning, wrap it into a span. In this case, the paragraph will be the parent, the span will be the children, and here I can, for instance, just set the color. Oh wait, let me see if I can remember it. I think it should be something like this. Yeah, awesome. And as you can see here, as horrible as it might look like, we have used the stripe color to represent this learning word without disrupting the flow that was implicit through the paragraphs. Let me just remove these two tags and let's continue with this list of elements that we can use. We have then the lists. We have the unordered list, so easy to remember, UL, unordered list, and we have the ordered list, that is, of course, OL. How can we use them? Both of them are containers of list items, and I think that the logic is pretty clear here. So we have a parent, the UL, for instance, followed by a list of children with the type LI. So let's go back to our page and let's build this first list, UL. And the things that we're adding here will be HTML, and then GIT that we will learn today. Then we have CSS, and last but not least, our JavaScript. Let's put. As you can see, this list is rendered as a list. So it has this horrible dot on the left, and it has this text on the right. Each element is taking a new line for itself. If we change, for any reason, the UL into OL, the browser will render it into an ordered list. That means that, as you can see, we don't have the dot anymore, but we have an ascending number from 1 to whatever. Okay? So let me go back to the slides. The parent of all the elements, one of the most used one, is the div. The div is just a full-width block container. It might look useless at the beginning, but it's one of the most important tags and one of the tags that you will use over and over, because it allows you to box the parts of your page in subcontainers. So you will use it when you want to change the style of a specific section. You will use it when you want to change the arrangement of some element. You will use it over and over a lot of time. So it can be used for styling and organizing the elements on your page, and it's one of the most used tags out there. As you can see here, for instance, we're using it to holding a paragraph and a span, and this should work seamlessly. You will understand better the meaning of it on Wednesday, when we will introduce the styling based on the tag name, etc., etc., etc. At that point, it will be pretty clear. But for the moment, let's see that this allows to have the number of children that we want in it. Like, for instance, if we want to create this div, we can just wrap this whole section into this div. And if we want, just for the sake of the visual part, to give like a background of, this will look horrible, but it's just for the sake of science. So if I now refresh the page and I take a look to this, as you can see, both the children of the div now has this background color. Now I will remove it because it hurts, definitely it hurts. But as you can see, by the fact that these two elements are contained into this div, we can assign the div to the div a specific style that will then be applied to the content of it. So it's pretty powerful, and we will learn how to use it soon, but maybe in a less painful way. Okay, cool. Let's go with the next topic. So some of the tags most of the tags, I would say all of the tags can have some attributes. What are the attributes? The attributes are key value pairs used to configure a specific tag. Some attributes are valid for all the tags, like IDs, class, and style. You have seen that I wrote into the tag style followed by a specific style, and that results into a change into my page. Style, in that case, is one attribute. And some of them are specific for the tag itself. Like, for instance, for the image, I can set the source that will be the name of the picture that I want to render. EMG, of course, stands for image, and it's used to render a picture in the page. It requires the source attribute to set the image we want to display, and it requires the alt attribute to show when the picture is not available, easy of access for the CEO. And of course, image is a self-closing tag. We cannot include extra HTML inside an image. This is an example, but let's see it in action. I have a picture here into my desktop. I'm just moving the picture inside of my W1D1 folder so that now both are at the same level. If I see the structure from Visual Studio Code, as you can see, the two files are now here at the same level. So now I can just add my tag EMG source that stands for the source of this picture. And since Visual Studio Code is very kind with me, it will suggest me the path to that specific image. We have to specify the alt for blind people and for the crawler of the browser. That will be Thrive School logo, for instance. And we know that this is a self-closing tag. Let's go back here. Okay, this is far too big. This is far too big. But as you can see, with one line of code, we managed to add that picture to our page. Let me just reduce it inside. Images has also other parameters that we can use, like height, for instance, and we can set the height to 100. No, let's make it 60 pixels. Let's try like this. Okay, so as you can see now, it's more human compared to the rest of the text. And now we're able to have our image on top of it. Again, source to specify the name of the picture we want to show, alt for the blind people reader and for the crawler itself, and other parameters like height, width, that are specific to the image itself. We will learn later how to do it with CSS. That is a little more, let's say, modern as an approach. After the image, we have another super important element, the anchor tag. The anchor tag links an internal or external document. What does it mean? It requires the attribute href to set the URL of the element to refer. Every A element children is clickable by itself. Like, for instance, we can create a link like ahref google.com that will go to Google. Let's see how it works. So, for instance, here, welcome to Thrive School Ignite. Here, I can specify that I want this text to link to our website, https://thrive.school/ignite. I can save this, and now, wait. And now here, as you can see, as horrible as it might look like, because we haven't styled it yet, we're able to click on this and go to our website. Okay? But yeah, we lost the original page. So there is another cool attribute that we can add to the anchor tag to make our page open in a new window. That is called target blank. This will open the link into a new tab without closing this one. So if I click here, as you can see, my page is still available. But we also said that the anchor tag will make every children clickable and will make every children redirect to the website. So what I can do is also take this piece of code here and wrap my image around it. And now also my image will be clickable and will refer to the website, as you can see. So every element you put inside the anchor tag will be clickable. For instance, in this case, we will go to the main website. And as you can see, by clicking here, I will open a new tab with our page. Okay, so A stands for anchor tag and allows you to refer files or external websites. I say file because if I copy this website and I call it index2, and I just put into the body something like this is the second document, I'm able from the first document to create a link to this other file, specifying the name of the file with the path to the folder. Since these two files are in the same folder, I'm able to specify just the name of the file. And this will be click to go to an empty page. Okay, awesome. So as you can see, we have this new link here. And if I click, I go to this horrible page with just this explanatory text. Form is pretty complicated to some extent, but it allows us to handle the user data submission. How many times you went to a website and there was a form for leaving the email or a form to reserve a restaurant or something like that? The form is exactly built for that reason. So it's used by the user to fill information. It usually contains a list of input tags, and historically it was used and the only way to submit data. Now the usage is more for data validation. That means that it allows us to verify that the email is an email, that the text is a text, that the number is a number, and so on and so forth. Children of the form is usually the input tag, that are the data entry tag. We can use them to create an interface for user entry. Using the type attribute, we can use it for file, numbers, email, password, button, file, image, date, time. And for example, we can use it like input, type, email, placeholder, your email. Let's see them in action. So if I go back here, and I create here. Now we know how to do it. I can create another h2, leave your email. You can just add an input of type email with placeholder your email. And then what we can do is to add another input of type button value send, something like this. Of course, this button won't work, but it's just to show you how it will look like. So as you can see here, we have this, let me zoom a little. We have this input field in which we can type our email, and we have let's try school. And we have this send button that is doing exactly nothing. So there is no action attached to this button. But still, we created part of a form that might be relevant for our application. This could be a chat box and could be the place in which you type the message that you are about to send. This could be the comment box under a picture on Instagram. Could be whatever you want. And the send button, of course, is the button that you press to execute something. There is a full list of available type of this button. We can have type number, for instance. That will allow us just to put numbers in it. So if I go here, as you can see, we have this more and less button that appears. And if I try to type letters, as you can hear, maybe you can see that I'm typing a lot, but nothing appears. If I type number, this works. The only letter that works is the E a single time, because for some mathematical purpose, the E could be the complex number or could be the exponent in a scientific notation for numbers. Okay, and of course, there are many of them. Like, for instance, I don't know, we can add the input type file. Just 1 sec. Just 1 sec. Okay, awesome. So we can have this input type file. And now if we refresh the page and we go here, we have the usual file selector form. So if I click here, it will open up a folder in my hard drive to look for a file that I want to submit, that I want to do whatever I want. Wait, I see that you wrote some questions in the chat that I was looking for. So do you have any question? So what does the target attribute do again? Yeah, it allows us to open the link into a new tab without disrupting, let's say, the current application that we're running. So any other question? Okay, awesome. So of course, to HTML, there is much more. This is just the top of the iceberg, let's say, because there is the HTML table that is not very used anymore because it's not responsive. And if you can recall, responsive means that scales accordingly to the device that we're using. So mobile, desktop, or tablet. File HTML5 tags that includes the semantic. So we have several tags like footer, header, main, aside, that allows the browser to better understand which are the important parts of our page, or video and audio for multimedia purposes. So if we want to load a video, we can use the video tag. If we want to play an audio, we can use the audio tag. But not only that, there are other inputs like text area, radio buttons. Text area, of course, is a text input that is a little bigger, that goes on multiple lines. Radio buttons is when you have a selection of a single element out of a choice. Drop-down list, that are those lists in which you click, and there is a list that pops out from whom you can select the value that you want. Just 1 sec. Can input with enough type values can give us a lot from. Okay, yes, okay, it was already answered. And of course, there are tags for styling. So the style tag that we will get to know on Wednesday, that will be the parent of all the CSS style inside of our page, and for dynamic content or for scripting, like the tag script. And of course, the best is yet to come. So any question before we move to Git? You can open your mic and speak out loud. Is this too fast, too slow, too boring? I see somebody excited, somebody KO. Okay, let's start with Git. So what is Git? Git is the most famous versioning system. It allows developers to save their code in commits, and it allows developers to share their code and collaborate with the code. So it's kind of a software that allows to have save games in your code. In any moment in time, you can just create a commit that is nothing more and nothing less than a save game into your favorite game, okay? This is what the commits are about. And of course, there are a lot of other features that allows collaboration that we will see later on. First thing first, the most hard thing at the beginning is to go for the first-time config of Git. You can install it from Git SCM. That has, in the presentation, you will find the link both for Windows or for Mac. For Mac, there should be also the essential tools or the build tools, I can't remember the name, that install it automatically. So if you install that, that is the one that comes with Xcode, you should have automatically Git installed. Once you are done with Git, first thing first, if you open a terminal and you type Git, it should give you a message like this, like how to use it. If it's not, probably you haven't installed it correctly and it's not working, okay? Once you're done with the installation, you have to set just the first time, for the first time configuration, 2 values. The username that you can set to my name, could be your nickname, could be a name of fantasy, and same things for the email. So git config global user.email. You can type it in the CMD on Windows or in the terminal on your Mac or on your Linux system. So the command, you can type them here into the command prompt, like git config global, etc. I don't want to rewrite my configuration. Or in Visual Studio Code, you can open a terminal. So if you go on terminal, new terminal, it will open a new terminal in the very folder in which you need to be. Okay, so as you can see here, we are in this folder that looks like the folder I expect to be, is the folder I created on my desktop that is called W1D1. If Git is the system that allows you to save the game, let's say, to save your code on your computer, GitHub is the one that allows you to share it into the cloud. So if, I don't know, with your smartphone, you can take videos, and that is Git. But then there is YouTube in which you can upload your videos. Or with your smartphone, you can take pictures. But then there is, for instance, Google Photos that allows you to share them with your family in a commonly created album, and so on and so forth. So GitHub is the most famous Git repository on the cloud. And it's used by millions of developers, companies, and communities. And it allows you to simply push your save game, push your code into the cloud, and make it available to the ones that you want. And it has been acquired by Microsoft a few years ago for, I think, 7.9 billion. That is a big number for a startup that does developer tools. Apart from this, one thing worth mentioning is that GitHub is not only a place where to save your code. It is a thriving community where you can find open source code and libraries that you can use to improve your own code base. And apart from that, is also a reputation-based platform. That means that the more you use, the more you collaborate, the more you will get reputation. And this reputation may earn you your next job, okay? Let's take a look on how GitHub looks like. So if I go, here we go. Oh, come on. GitHub.com. It's possible to register. You just need an email, okay? And once you register, you will have the possibility to create your repositories. A repository is a container for your save games. For instance, I will create a new one for this session that we're doing together. I will put it, I will put it on mine for the moment. I will move it later. That will be, we say, week 1, day 1. Or I can call it in the way that I want, like Ignite, week 1, day 1, something like this. And I can select if I want this repository to be public so that everyone can see the code that I'm publishing, or private. That means that only me and the people that I select can see this specific repository. If I click Create Repository, it will simply create this empty box. And it will provide me all the piece of code that I will need to connect my local save game source to the cloud. Let's configure our repository for the code that we wrote today together. So we have these 3 files and we have no versioning at the moment. Here, let me just see. As you can see in the presentation, the command that I need to run is git init that will create a repository out of the folder in which the command has been executed. So if I go back to Visual Studio Code, here I can run git init. One super important thing is to check if you are in the correct folder. More often than not, people execute git init in the root folder of the computer. And that creates a little issue because it will have to hold and to host and to analyze millions of files. And this will result in subsequent problems. So please always mind the folder that you are in. Now that we executed git init, as you can see here, the files are green. So Visual Studio Code says, yeah, we are in a repo and these files are not part of any commit. So you can save this file. These files are not saved yet. If we take a look to what happened to the folder that we're working in, that is the desktop W1 D1, there is this hidden .git subfolder that contains some information. If we want to delete the repository, we can just delete this Git folder. I delete this Git folder, and as you can see, Visual Studio Code is aware of the fact that this folder is not under version control anymore. Again, if I want to initialize the Git, I just need to do this. Now that, that we execute git init, as you can see here in the third icon of the window pane that goes under the name of source control, we see that we have 3 pending changes. If we click here, we can give a name to our save game, that is the message for our commit. In this case, for instance, we can just call it first commit of week 1, day 1, Ignite. By pressing commit, it will create the commit. As you can see on source control, there are no more files. There is no more change to be published. And if I take a look here, these files are not in green anymore, and the icon is not there. But what happens if I change one of these files? Like for instance, here I don't want the, I want to add a new div here that will be my footer, in which I will type something like all rights reserved, something like this, 2021, whatever corp. As you can see, in the very moment in which I save this file, we have a symbol here. Git is aware, and therefore Visual Studio Code, that the file has been modified. What does it mean? That in our save game, we have a previous version. If we want to update that very same version, we need to commit again. We need to save our game. We completed the quest. Now we have to save again. So here I can just specify added footer. One thing worth mentioning is that the more meaningful these names are, the better it will be for you and for your team in the future. So never have a commit with something like this or an empty message, okay? So added footer / copyright, something like this. And by pressing here, I'm doing a commit. Some of you might expect right now to see the things on GitHub, but there is one step missing. If we go here, as you can see, the repository is still empty. And why? Because we never told to that specific local repository to marry this marvelous cloud-based GitHub repository. So first thing first, GitHub is very kind with us, and it's giving us the instruction we need to run to add this, to connect, let's say, the local repository to the one into the cloud. So I can just copy these lines of code over and over. The first one, let's read this one together. Git remote add origin, and then the URL of my repository. It goes without saying that this command, even if it might look complicated, is just telling Git, hey, local Git, please add this URL for saving your save games, your commits into the cloud. And if we press enter, the command is executed. We have then to, let me see, why should I branch? They changed one thing lately, but I think it should work regardless. So I'm setting main as the main branch. That means is the one we're gonna push the code, and I will explain you what the branch are later. And if I push all the code just by copy and pasting the command, as you can see, it takes some seconds, but at the end of the day, the result is branch main set up to track to remote branch main from origin. So if I go to my server, to my GitHub, sorry, I can see my files. And if you take a look here, these are actually my files at the latest version, since I have the footer here. But I didn't push just my files, but the whole history of save games. As you can see here, I can go in commits and see both the version of my file. And if I click on the latest one, I can see that the only thing that changed from the previous version to the second one is this 4 lines here, an empty line, and then the div with all right reserved. Why this matters? Imagine that you are collaborating with some of the classmates on a project. This will allow you to understand what changed between one version and the next one, what your colleagues are working on, or what things happen from one version to the other. And more often than not, you will find yourself going back to a previous commit to understand why something that was working is not. Okay, so it's super important for you to have this history to better understand where the things go south, or to better understand the improvement that the colleagues has made. There is a full list of commands that you can run from your terminal. In this case, I used a mixed version between Visual Studio Code and the command that you can run from your console. Git init was the command that I ran on the console that initialized the repository, but I could have had all the files with git add. That was the operation that I did through the source control pane on the left-hand side of Visual Studio Code. The commit is the one that creates the new commit, the new save, okay? That was the one I was executing from Visual Studio Code. And of course, git remote add origin is the one we copy pasted from GitHub to connect our local folder to the one into the cloud. And git push, of course, is the one that takes the local commits, all of them, and send them to the star, okay? So, of course, there is far more than what we've seen so far. So thanks to Git and GitHub, we can have collaboration like branches. We can divide the code base in different parallel tracks in which everyone can work on a specific feature and then merge together that feature when it's done, when it's tested, when it's good to go. There are the pull requests. That is the ability of committing your code to a specific branch and require from a review from the maintainer of the repository. And there are other features like bug tracking, in which the users of your source code of your application can note down bugs that they figured out. Or some of your colleagues that are working maybe on the backend can tell you that they spot a bug in your code, and you can track it all on GitHub. And of course, it's a thriving community in which the people can comment on future release, can request for feature, and it involves the reputation I was talking before. And this is super important because there is a big family out there of open source developers. The open source community is the one that maintains most of the tools that we're going to use during the course. The open source code means that the code it's it's completely visible to you. You can access the repository of the company and take a look on how the things works there. And you can also download that code and create your own version if you prefer it another way. Example of open source is, for instance, Linux, Android, even if not all the core parts of it, and so on and so forth. Visual Studio Code is open source. And of course, I understand pretty well, and most of you will reach out for help in configuring Git and GitHub, because the initial steps are kind of complicated. Once you get used to it, it is a cakewalk, but at the very beginning, it might be a little hostile. Okay, we're almost at the end of this first night together, but what's next? So in the next week, in the next lecture, we're going to talk a lot about CSS. We will see how to target element in our HTML page. For instance, I want to change only the title of the second paragraph that I have, or I want to target all the links so that the color is not the blue anymore, but is the red, because my color palette is black and red, something like that. And how to style them, how to apply a background color, how to apply a border, how to apply, I don't know, transparency effect, and how to position them. I want this X symbol to be on the top right corner of my application. I want this play button to be always in the center of the screen. I want this element to scale accordingly when I access my page from mobile, and so on and so forth. And it will be definitely super fun, because HTML, I think it's one of the most boring thing, and therefore I'm sorry for you to endure this introduction, but the rest will be very, very fun.